Hello, very good evening to you. Welcome to our look at what's going to be in the newspapers tomorrow morning. With me here in the studio, the broadcaster Sharma Pereira and the lawyer Andrew Kidd. Welcome to you both. Thank you very much for being with us. Let me just take you through the front pages as we have them at the moment. And the FT reports on the possible purchase of Twitter. Both Google and Salesforce are in talks to buy the social media company. The Independent reports on the Labour leadership contest, saying polls are suggesting many working-class voters are not keen on Jeremy Corbyn. The Daily Mail claims that patients are at risk because EU doctors can work in the United Kingdom without adequate safety checks. The Times leads on the alleged sale of forged British passports and personal identity details on the dark web. The Daily Telegraph says a new British Bill of Rights will ensure that servicemen and women will no longer be subject to European human rights laws on the battlefield. The Daily Express looks at what it calls the mind-blowing arrogance of the European Parliament President, Martin Schulz. And The Guardian says 1 in 7 takeaway restaurants fail basic hygiene tests. Well, we're going to be talking about quite a few of those stories, but let's kick off, Andrew, with the Defence Secretary talking about British troops being the victims of witch hunt, and this is legal cases being brought against them from things that have happened on the battlefield, Iraq and Afghanistan particularly.
I mean, this really captures people's attention, and people feel really strongly about this because rightly that our servicemen and women are doing a job protecting our country, and then they're being dragged through the courts in these really difficult cases. And Michael Fallon here is saying that it's going to come to an end. I think a lot of people will support that. And he's saying that the European legislation will be replaced by a British Bill of Rights, and there will be a limitation period, so there will be a long stop date after which these cases cannot be brought. So at least that will give certainty to these servicemen and women that are being dragged through the courts. So I think that's got to be a positive thing.
But Sharma, some people will say, I suppose, you know, soldiers have to have legal constraints on them, don't they?
Of course they do, and that's what separates us, isn't it, from freedom fighters and from ISIS. It's the fact that we fight fair, that we have rules which we stick to and that our soldiers stick to. I mean, the problem here is not that there's a witch hunt. The problem is that there are lawyers, like Andrew, presumably, exploiting loopholes in the law that allow them to chase after soldiers and accuse them of stuff. As has been suggested recently, almost perniciously, and indeed one company has closed down as a result of that. So it's not actually a witch hunt, it's an exploitation of sensible and fair laws. And I think it's just the wording of this which makes it sound as if what we do is wrong. It's not what we do that's wrong, it's the way we've been doing it that's wrong.
Well, and one point that Michael Fallon makes in this article is that it's not only worrying, intimidating, to use his words, for soldiers who, you know, retrospectively think they might be prosecuted for something, but also for people who are serving now. They're worried about in the future they could possibly be prosecuted for something. So it does have a sort of impact potentially on morale, I suppose.
Well, inevitably, and as Sharma says, there has to be accountability, and nobody's saying we remove accountability. It's just striking the right balance between accountability and allowing our servicemen and women to do their job. At the end of the day, we're giving them a weapon and we're saying go into this war zone and keep us safe.
So has that balance been tilted too much?
It seems to me that, I mean, human rights gets a bad press in the UK, let's face it, but it's our observance of human rights, which, as Sharma says, separates us from the bad guys.
And we can't conflate bad use of good laws with morality. You know, did that baddie deserve to have a beating? Yes, we probably all think secretly, and some of us publicly, yes, he did deserve that beating. But should our soldiers have done it? Well, you know, that is what separates us from the other side. And I noticed very interestingly that Sir Michael is quoted at the end talking about the Russians and what's going on at the moment in Syria. And he says, if it was a mistake, Russia should apologise. If it was deliberate, then the Russian commanders should be turned in for prosecution. So actually, that's all that's happening here, is when somebody has transgressed, they're being turned in for prosecution. What has upset us is that people are exploiting this to make what appear to be pernicious allegations against individuals.
Let's go on to the Times. A rather different story about the dark web. and saying that forged British passports and things like driving licences, even GCSE certificates are being sold on hidden internet websites in the so-called dark web or the deep web, whatever you want to call it. I mean, we've known for a long time that all sorts of things and weapons and drugs and whatever are sold on this on the dark web. It's
Children, everything.
yeah. And so is that not a particularly shocking revelation, perhaps, is it?
No, I suppose not. I mean, we were saying before we weren't entirely sure what the
Absolutely.
dark web was.
Oh, okay.
Where
And
is
we,
this
and we
dark?
weren't absolutely sure what the story was either, because we just kind of
No.
thought all of those, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughters, when they were younger, got fake driving licences. It didn't cost them 800 quid, it cost them 20 quid. And that was without having to go to the dark web. I mean, maybe you get a better class of false driving licence if you go on the dark web.
But it does take a bit of a sinister tone when you actually read the article, and it says, you know, Islamic State jihadists are known to be adept at using the encoded technology which enables them to use the dark web, and have repeatedly shared guides on how to do it. And, you know, they're getting weapons and Class A drugs, and those things are circulating. So
Yeah, but so are Colombian drug barons, and so are Russian whatevers. You know, I mean, people are using the dark web across the world, and they are all people like Islamic State, aren't they? They're all
not
people.
all, but-
Well,
No,
criminals,
what I mean
a lot
is
of
they are all
criminals.
A lot of
involved
criminals.
in crime.
Yeah.
I mean, just to explain to anyone who doesn't know what the dark web is, it's a kind of, it's like the internet, but it's sort of below the surface, isn't it? And it's encrypted. That's the key thing. So
I think
that's the key, isn't
there's
it?
a degree of secrecy involved about it.
I mean, journalists will. They might not use the dark web, but they will certainly use those levels of encryption. They'll use Tor and other software to actually create that kind of onion state, which doesn't allow other people to access what they're doing.
And to that extent, it's a
It's
force
a
for
form
good,
of it.
actually.
Yeah,
It
But
can
it's,
be.
Well, privacy, clearly, of course, it can be. It's how it's used, and clearly it's being manipulated
Yeah.
here and used for.
And the our states must use
Yeah.
the dark web in some form.
But you're not hugely impressed by that as a front-page lead for the Times?
I
by
prefer the
sound
picture
of
of
it.
Jeremy Paxman, which was above it.
Yes.
It says why I hated my dad. I thought at least he knew him.
Yes, right. Well, we won't go into too much about Jeremy Paxman's father, but the Times is featuring exclusive extracts from his autobiography, should anybody be interested in that. Now, the Guardian newspaper is looking ahead to the Labour Party conference, of course, and we're going to get the leadership results tomorrow. Will it be Owen Smith? Will it be Jeremy Corbyn? All the money seems to be on Jeremy Corbyn.
And here again is another sort of story that's very interesting, stating the obvious, which is that Labour's divisions will become irreconcilable and the damage to the party terminal if it enters another bitter year of infighting.
And that's a warning from Andy Burnham, actually, isn't it?
Yes, it is, who will, of course, by then be Mayor of Manchester.
Who's not actually a
and in charge
Corbynista,
of his
is
own
he?
fiefdom.
He's not a Corbynista as such.
No, he sort of got dispatched, didn't he, as part of that initial leadership?
Well, as this paper says, he's remained neutral during the leadership race, but he's saying Labour will only be able to heal if there are serious concessions from the leader. So he's looking for some sort of compromise between the two wings of the party.
Yeah, and Mr. Corbyn has said there's an olive tree outside his office, not so much an olive branch, but so he's prepared to offer some softening on his policies, but it remains to be seen what form that will take.
You'd have a hard time sort of arguing that he was trying his best in terms of communications.
Yes, and his approach to Brexit was along a similar line. So,
Yes.
or his approach to campaigning for Remain.
Yes.
And if he puts as much effort into bringing the party back together as he did for that, then there certainly
about
will...
7.5.
Well, indeed.
I mean, it looks like he's going to win tomorrow. What is your, Sharma, what's your perception of what that would mean for the Labour Party?
My perception is that it will mean that at the next election it will be touch and go for the Labour Party. But I would have said 2 months ago...
Touch and go in what sense?
2 months ago I would have said if they carry on like this they will lose the next election without question. Now that Mrs May has started pushing her own agenda, actually I think it could be 50-50 by the time we get to the ballot
So you
boxes,
think Jeremy
because
Corbyn...
they're both going to lose ground this
You think
way.
a Jeremy Corbyn Labour Party could win the next election?
I think if the Tories carry on in the way that they have been for the last couple of weeks, yes.
Okay. We've also, on that subject of the Labour Party, got a Matt cartoon in the Telegraph. We always like to feature Matt cartoons because they're so good in the Telegraph. And it's just a very simple policeman being asked for directions in Liverpool. The Labour conference, says the policeman, turn left, then further left. I should be doing this in a Scouse accent, probably, but I won't. Turn left, then further left, then much more left, and it's on your left. Do you like that? Does that tickle your fancy?
Yeah, it's
I think
great.
it's a pretty accurate summary. I mean, I'm just staggered that Sharma thinks that Mr Corbyn's got any chance of a hope in hell in 2020. I mean, do you really believe that?
Well, do you know, I honestly thought when Theresa May
Why
came
do-
in
do-
that
why
she
do you
would
not, Andrew?
change
I
it.
mean, come on, look at the evidence, look at the polls. He can't even bring his party together, let alone the country.
I completely agree on that point, but I think that she is somehow crippling the Tories. I don't know. She's just brought in too much that was not on the manifesto. She's
Such as?
taking them off somewhere else altogether, grammar schools. What did she do this week? I've forgotten it already. But she keeps taking them off message, and
But
I think
that's not going to be enough
Don't
to,
you
give, to
think?
hand victory to Corbyn, let's face it.
No, I think what you get is you get a 50-50. What you get is another coalition. Or
Oh,
a demolition,
okay, well,
actually, is I think what it would be with
We've
May
moderated
and,
in
May and
2
Corbyn.
minutes.
Okay.
From
Demolition.
victory to coalition.
Not a coalition between Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn, I don't think. Anyway, the FT, they've got a story about Twitter. I don't know if you guys are on Twitter, but it looks like it could be up for sale with Salesforce and Google in talks to buy it. What do you think of that, Andrew?
Well, yes. I mean, we were reading this before. I was just surprised at how much bigger Facebook is than Twitter. I mean, I use Twitter so much more than I use Facebook. But it says here that Facebook is 24 times larger than Twitter. And
Snapchat also has a higher valuation
yes,
than Twitter.
I don't know much about that. I don't use it. But what is interesting is that Twitter has been flatlining, and they are struggling to get the new users. And there was talk about loosening the 140 character, which I don't know how I feel about that, because at the moment I like it because it's snappy, it's punchy, and if you turn it into a blog where there's no character limit, that may make it.
Do you
something
tweet a lot?
entirely different.
Do you tweet a lot?
Well, what's a lot? I mean, probably daily.
Yeah.
So it's a great way of interacting with people.
And I think there's a huge difference between Twitter and social media sites like Facebook. Facebook is all about the heart. It's people, obsessing or opining. Whereas Twitter is about the head. It's just sort of little thoughts that come out. It's pieces of news. It's information. It's not really a conversation.
Do you like Twitter?
I love Twitter and I don't like Facebook.
Oh, okay.
Because
All
I much prefer sharing what's in my head than what's in my heart. But I think this is interesting.
You're doing
because-
both tonight.
So you think. But I think this is just really interesting because where does Twitter go? They won't monetise Twitter. They won't put ads in, really. They have those odd promoted ads, but
I never
really...
got those.
But it is
I don't
worth.
understand how
The
Twitter can
FT
make
is
money.
saying it is valued at $16 billion, which is pretty
Well, it
big
has
money.
so many people. There must be a way to actually start influencing those people. But the question is how. We can see how Facebook does it.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll see what happens to Twitter. Will it be sold? Will it not? And the Mail. They have a story about patients at risk from EU doctors because they say thousands of EU doctors can work in the United Kingdom without basic safety checks. That's according to a watchdog warning today. What do you think of that, Andrew? Is that a worry?
Well, it is. The headline is a worry. I mean, the Daily Mail supported Brexit, and they're sort of continuing with that line. I mean, Neil Dixon, the head of the GMC, is saying that a loophole needs to be
The General
closed.
Medical Council.
General Medical, and saying there's a real weakness when it comes to protecting the public, because the crux of it is we can't check their competencies. Under EU equality rules, language can't be tested, and the Royal College of Surgeons is another body that's called for this loophole to be closed. So, yeah, on the facts that we have here, it is worrying.
Yeah, I know, but what they're not saying is why this is an issue at this minute. Is it because European doctors are accidentally knocking us all off and we're all, disappearing from GP surgeries because we no longer exist, or we're all in hospital beds that, and it's down to European GPs not diagnosing us? Or is this just another bit of fluff to make
it's relevant now
angry?
because we're all talking about Article 50 and when will it be invoked, and the Daily Mail is keeping the Brexit.
Okay.
And it's Neil Dixon, of course, who is former BBC.
Former BBC correspondent,
he
yes.
must be telling...
He must
he's
be.
obviously...
Anyway, having gone from that health story, let's stick to health, because The Guardian have got something potentially alarming. If you're watching this on a Friday night with a takeaway on the sofa, as you watch us, you might be a bit alarmed to know that 1 in 7 takeaways fail hygiene tests, according to Guardian analysis. And the 10 worst areas, apparently, are the London boroughs of Newham, Edinburgh, Shetland Islands, Islington, Lancashire, Harrow, Hertsmere in Hertfordshire, Midlothian, Luton and Ealing in West London. So
I bet they're full of fried chicken shops, didn't you?
Yes.
It's just, I thought this was quite fun and also actually very worrying, because I'm sure you won't have, Andrew, but I'm sure we've all got kids who come in late at night with things in plastic containers that really don't look edible
I'm
at
the
all.
one coming in late.
I was going to say, not just the kids.
You should be looking at the scores in the doors.
Well, I'm not
which is
going
what
to.
I think
I live in
referring
Islington.
to here.
I'm certainly not having a takeaway on the way home.
No.
I'll be very choosy where I get my takeaway.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful. I do remember, Ben, actually, at one point we used to frequent a Chinese restaurant a lot near where we lived, and suddenly in all the newspapers was a photograph of a mouse in their sweet and sour sauce running up the wall, which had been a photograph taken by food hygiene inspectors who obviously closed the restaurant down for 2 months, and it reopened and it's still going strong. But I have to say, it really made us think as a family unit, where do we eat and how do we know?
And Andrew, you're a takeaway fiend then, are you?
I try and eat healthily, but inevitably...
No, I'm not saying you don't, but what's sort of
inevitably
what takes green juices home, don't you?
I don't know.
What do you like? Do you like a takeaway curry?
Occasionally, yes. Chinese takeaway. Occasionally I indulge, but...
Kebab.
It's not a crime. You don't need to be so defensive. It's allowed.
Yes, fish finger sandwiches.
Anyway, if you're watching at home, enjoy your takeaway. Andrew Sharma, thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure.
Very good to have you on the programme. Now, don't forget, all the front pages are online on the BBC News website. You can read a detailed review of the papers if you'd like to. It's all there for you 7 days a week at bbc.co.uk/papers. And you can see us there too, with each night's edition of the papers posted on the page very soon after we finish. So thank you to Andrew Kidd and Sharma Pereira. And from me, bye.